Akibastrip is a strange and wonderful game. If you came here contemplating if you should play it or not, the answer is yes. Go and play it. It's a lot of fun. You fight vampires by pulling off their clothes. It's fantastic. That's the end of my review. Moving on to what the video is actually about, Akibastrip boasts being an accurate recreation of Akiba as it was between autumn of 2012 and summer of 2013. When I played it almost a decade ago, I always wondered, how accurate could it be? And unless you have some kind of mastery over the laws of time, that question is going to be challenging to answer. Yes, you could just use Google Street View to change the time, but no, shut up, I don't really want to do that. So instead, I thought, how much has Akiba changed since Akibastrip? So over the course of 4-ish hours in the pouring rain, I took 159 photos laying out the area that you can visit in Akibastrip to see what's the same and what's different. And I'm going to warn you right now that I'm no photographer. All these photos I took with my dying iPhone 7S, and I took them all very meekly because of an incident last year where I was taking a photo of a picture of all the girls from Love Live splashed against this exact window, and a man came up to me and said, "That's rude." So I agreed with him and immediately left and deleted all of those images. I kind of wish I kept a few. To start, we'll take a look at the first area of the game, the Radio Kaikan area. Immediately to our left we can see a collection of restaurants, Beakers and a Timmy, followed by a convenience store called Nunez. At the time, this would have been the location of Becker's, Time and New Days. Now, Becker's has been replaced with a Starbucks, and Time with Jonathan's. New Days is still there, but has gotten a bit of a makeover. Down this street, I once saw a man yelling at a bush. Later, when I returned to this street, the police were talking to him. Next to Nunez, there is this power box, and it's still there. Standing at this corner, we can see the first major difference. The Sega building is gone and has been replaced with the Namco building. Matter of fact, all of the Sega buildings you can see in Akibastrip at this point in time are gone. What isn't gone though is the sign advertising Maid Dreaming, the largest maid cafe chain in Japan. It's a staple in Akiba, so of course I went to it. To the right of the Sega building is a set of tube things. They're above an appliance store called Lala. Back in 2013 this was Labby, and now in 2024 it's Softmap. Those tubes sitting above are a series of escalators, which can give you a nice view of the street below and the building across the street. We'll take a look at that view in a moment though. First we're going to finish heading down this road. Next to the Lala store is a construction site, just like it was in 2013. Plastered on the front of the cover is an ad for a game called Strippism. Now Strippism isn't a real game per se, it's a mini-game you can play in Akibastrip. But the interesting thing is that these characters are Kura Kagami, Rin Kokonoe, and Mimi Usa from the series Kodomo no Jikan. Don't watch that series by the way, just don't watch it. Jumping forward to 2024, the building's renovations have finished and it now holds a small collection of independent stores for anime merchandise. If you're someone looking for any HoloLive alcohol, this is the only place I've ever seen it for sale. If we go up the street any further, it sends us to the next area, so let's just stand here awkwardly in the centre of the road and take a look at the rest of the left side of the street. The last notable thing is that the building right on the corner is empty now. Which is what I would say if I didn't go back a few weeks later and see that it's full of stuff now. Moving across the street we can see a store named Gamers, and next to it, a store named Card Kingdom. Both of which are still there, although this big billboard is covering the Card Kingdom sign. Speaking of cards, up these stairs here is where I buy my Vice Schwartz cards. You can also sell them, but you need a permanent address in Japan. Now we're going to be heading up those tubes so we can get a nice view of the Atelier building. While it's not much to look at in-game, this building does frequently have collabs with anime. This time it was Bocce the Rock. And here's a picture of that box again. I actually forgot to get a photo of this side, but to be honest there isn't really any noticeable changes. That's the Radio Kaikan area done, so let's head back up that street and have a look at the main road. Immediately we can see another Sega building, and a bit further in the distance, a Club Sega building. Nestled under the trade track is a drugstore named Matsumoto Kiyoshi. Like I said before, the Sega building is gone, replaced with a GGO, which is a common arcade found pretty much everywhere. The Matsumoto Kiyoshi is still tucked away under there though. And yes, I can see that adult store, don't worry, we'll get to that. First, we're going to travel up this road so we can get a good view of the opposite street. Taking a look at that Club Sega building, you can spot an ad for something called Batzilla, and a bear in a chef's hat. The Club Sega building has been replaced with, you guessed it, another Gugio. The Moolah still stands, now sporting a Genshin Impact girl on the front. The next part is one of the more iconic Akiba areas, which has remained relatively untouched. There's the Yoshinova, renamed Noguchiya, Coco Curry, and although I didn't take the best picture, Comic Zin. At the corner of this junction is another softmat building, as well as a McDonald's. The softmat building is now a big camera, and although I didn't have a photo, the McDonald's is now a McDonald's. Walking further up, we can have a quick break at Sister Donut, or as it's known in real life, Mr. Donut. Moving across the street now, we can see a store for the famous idol group AKW48, followed by a Hon Quixote. Back in the real world, these are the AKB48 idol group store, and of course a Don Quixote. Next to it is an Animate, and a comic Tora Nonana. Nowadays, the building that Animate occupied is empty. In 2022, comic Tora Nonda closed, and Animate moved into its spot. Animate is now 7 stories tall, and for the love of God, you go up the left set of stairs and down the right set of stairs. It's really not that hard to figure out, it says so on the floor. From this shot, we can also see a store called Lamatara, still in the same place it was in Akibastrip. Moving along is a Taito station, another arcade staple of Japan, remaining unchanged from 2013. Moving adjacent to the softmat building, we can have a better look at the road leading back to the Kaikan area. The Sanai building is really an Aisan building. If you saw a suit in Aki that you liked, you can head down to Aoki and ask if they still have it in stock. And we can also see another Lamtara store, also remaining unchanged. Which brings us back to the crossing in front of the Kaikan area. And as promised, here it is, Love Mercy, which is very welcome to overseas buyer. I also noticed that there's a sign for a KFC renamed KCF. Heading towards the KCF, we end up in the back streets of Akiba, which is split into 2 areas, the side streets and Junktown. I won't spend very long here because these areas are very dense, and going over each and every minor change would be very time consuming, so I'm just not going to do that. Instead, I'll show you one standout store, and that's the K-Books located in side streets. Nowadays, the building is looking a lot more bare, but if we look right at the top, we can still see it's named Akiba Zone. However, as far as I know, there's no store called K-Books in the building. Before we move on though, I'll give you a tip. If you see any figure in an arcade crane machine that you like, come to this store first. Most of the time, you'll see it here for sale. What happens is, people who are much better at crane games than you or I win the figures at the arcades and sell them here. You can get them for a pretty reasonable price. Now, we're going to go down to the Electronic Town Plaza. I didn't take a shot at the station entrance, but trust me, it looks exactly the same. There's not a lot to see in this giant courtyard. To the right is a Beek's Coffee, and unlike the restaurant on Kaikan Street, its real-life counterpart, Beck's, is still there. The biggest change is just further up. In Akibastrip, we can see the AKW48 Idol Cafe, which in the real world was the location of the AKB48 Idol Cafe, which has since closed down and been replaced with a Tamashi Nation store. Off in the distance, fans of Steins Gate might recognize the Dai building, where Okabe finds Kurisu taking a nap at the start of the series. A bit later in the game, 3 more areas are unlocked: the Yodobashi area, Showa Street exit, and the Akihabara Park, and there's no real notable changes in any of these areas. Again, I'd just be wasting time standing in the rain if I was to meticulously document every single change in every business, or how every new days is just a new days now, or that the McDonald's is really called McDonald's. But for clarity, the Yodobashi is still Yodobashi, and Shosen is still Shosen. Hey, bonus change. Turns out this entire park area is just not it here in real life, and I just didn't notice at all because apparently I'm blind, even though I stood in this exact spot to take a photo of the Shosen building. I just didn't notice that this whole area is different. It's just a courtyard now. Yeah, and I don't remember there being any trees, but there might be. But I don't know if this was like fake or because I can't see any pictures of this anywhere, but it might just be being blind. Now we're going to go to our final area, the UDX building back in the plaza, now renamed UD Plus building. This big screen here cycles through various ads for real games, and a few music videos. The area here isn't much to look at, but would you believe me if I said you could find something really interesting here? You see, in Akibastrip, the textures on the building and the backgrounds are just pictures, literal snapshots of how the buildings looked in the summer of 2013. In a way, they are the most authentic thing about this whole game. It's what can be seen in the windows in one of these buildings is what inspired me to make this video. To the left of UTX we can find this, a building with green curtains. This is as close as you can get to this building, so you may need to squint a bit. But do you see that dark spot? The one just above my character's head? That right there is a predator figure, and I know that for a fact. Let me explain. I was introduced to this game 8 years ago by a certain YouTube channel. You may know them. They were called Two Best Friends Play. One of their video series was amply named Creepy Anime Bullshit, where they would play weird anime games. And of course, in one episode, they played Akibastrip. In this video, one of the ex-members, Miles, recounts his, at the time, recent trip to Akiba, where he saw this very building and noticed the predator figure. He wanted to take a picture of it, but he couldn't make it come out well, so he didn't. I always thought it was pretty cool how this figure managed to sneak into the game and become almost immortalized. To me, it made this particular building just seem more real than the rest, and it made the whole game just seem more alive. And I thought that maybe when I finally moved to Japan it would still be there, and I'd take a photo of it and kind of complete a loose narrative thread from a video that I watched once nearly a decade ago by a group who don't even play games together anymore. Because if there's any place in all of Japan that would keep something as innocuous as a figure of a predator in the window of some building, it would be Akiba. This place kept a lot over the years, and surely it could keep this. I've been to Akiba so many times, and finally, on a rainy day in March, I decided to check that window and take a photo. And wouldn't you know it, I took a photo of the wrong building. But even then, I still enjoyed doing this. I absolutely did not catch every change. Akiba is a big place, and I'm just one guy after all. For instance, during the game's loading screens, ads for theme cafes and stores come up, and I've definitely seen them before. Like this Maid Casino Cafe, it's still around. It's in the same building as another place where I buy my Vice Sports cards. I buy a lot of those cards. So maybe you noticed something that I didn't mention, either in this video or in real life. And if you did, feel free to say so. I remember stepping into Akiba for the first time last year and already knowing the layout based on my memories from playing Akibastrip and even from watching Love Live. It's a strange experience, needless to say, walking around confidently in a place that I've never been to but recognise so well. It felt slightly stalkerish pointing out to myself a spot where I once ripped a skirt off a vampire and watched it boil to death in the sun, or standing where Honk and Chica stood, where they both decided to become school idols. I didn't decide to become a school idol though. Standing there, I decided I should have brought an umbrella.